One sent me a message which I thought was interesting enough to share. And the message read, "Prime Minister, we haven't seen you in all that have been said." There is a government that is made up of ministers, heads of entities, permanent secretaries, various public officers and administrators, and they all must do their jobs. And my job at times is to ensure that they are all well coordinated and that they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing. Yes, so sometimes you are leading from the front, and sometimes you are quarterbacking, as the Americans would say. But there is never an absence of leadership. And I'm certain that you would have seen on display the ministers taking responsibility for their various portfolios as it relates to preparedness for the approaching weather event. This is a good segue because during this administration you would have seen the country at risk at several weather events and other kinds of threats, including a pandemic. And we have generally handled them all very well. I believe that our administration has managed crises very well and has ensured that we not only withstand the threats and the crises, but we recover and recover quickly and stronger than before. The weather events are becoming more frequent, but the frequency is also paralleled with greater intensity. So we're seeing more weather events which are more intense in nature. But we're also seeing these kinds of events overlapping. So you're seeing more weather events that are of increasing intensity, but before one is finished, another one is coming. So they are overlapping. So the administration has to have a standing policy and strategy to deal with crises that are more frequent, more intense, and overlapping. And that is why we have taken a very systematic approach to dealing with these issues. And there is existing a legislative framework which guides how we respond to crises that we term disasters, and that is the Disaster Risk Management Act, and that is the framework within which we will operate. Certainly, there are constitutional provisions under emergency powers, but it is at this time not our intention to utilize those powers. We would have heard from ODPEM in our briefing session before this, and ODPEM will give us an assessment shortly as to whether or not the government should declare a disaster or a threat of a disaster. I think you know what will happen, that given the update from the Met Office that Jamaica is at risk, there is a threat of the weather event affecting us in a significant way. The latest report suggests that the eye of the hurricane would be the weather system. It's not yet a hurricane. The system is about 220 miles southeast of Kingston, Jamaica. It is still moving very slowly, and that has posed a difficulty for us in planning because you don't want to put your preemptive measures too early. People get frustrated and say it's not going to come, and then they go back to normal activity, and then it comes. So we have been trying to calculate when to put in the preemptive measures. You would have seen that we gave an early preemptive measure yesterday by suspending schools. And today, I believe it is at 2 p.m. that the public sector will be asked to go home. I suspect the private sector will follow suit. So we're really trying to gauge, and there is a reason why we have to be very careful in engaging. Beryl, when it hit Jamaica, cost us about $57 billion of our 2023 GDP. And it probably cost us about 0.5% in terms of a reduction in our GDP growth. So it will have an impact. We don't want to exacerbate the impact by taking actions that will reduce commerce, reduce business too early. So it's a real guessing game. and it requires us meeting, analyzing, getting all the data so that we make the right decisions. So I know that there might be some frustration in the public, but bear with us because we can't make any mistakes with the measures that we put in place. Under the Disaster Risk Management Act, when the orders are proclaimed, which we expect that we will do a declaration possibly the end of today or sometime early tomorrow, the Act will give certain powers that the administration and the various entities that are vested with these powers will use for the protection of life and property. And we ask the public to cooperate. And you can be assured that before any of these measures are taken, there will be consultation with the stakeholders and there will be adequate public notice so that everyone will know. We do ask for your cooperation. We will take one other measure, which is under the Trade Act, to prevent any price gouging that might take place. The Minister of Health guided you properly to say stick with, healthy foods that won't perish as a result of lack of refrigeration. And he did mention sardines and water crackers. But I saw a picture recently of shelves in our supermarket and all the bread is gone. So people are taking precautions, stocking up on food. But it leads to a very important point that as these products become scarce, there may be persons tempted to raise their prices. And we will not have that during a disaster. And therefore, the Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce will shortly sign an order to this effect to prevent price gouging. Now, you would have heard extensive reports from Minister Vaz, the JPS, and from Minister Samuda and the NWC, and from the utility companies that they are projecting that as a result of the experience of Beryl, they will be in a better position. Evidence of that is that I am told that 31 linemen, are already in Jamaica, and others are being flown in as we speak. So the intention is to be ahead of the recovery effort should we be impacted in any significant way from this. I am told as well that the necessary precautions have been taken to ensure that telecommunications remain functional. Minister Samuda has advised that we will be able to have an uptime of about 80% within 72 hours of the hurricane for most customers, and that they have taken measures to control turbidity by closing off some of the intakes into their major water storage. This they are able to do because already those storage areas are full, so they can control and manage that. So we are expecting that if the event is a Beryl scale event, then we should be able to keep these services throughout as long as possible throughout the weather event if it does impact Jamaica. I'll make here another statement which is of import. During Hurricane Beryl, the loss of telecommunications was not so much because of the impact of the hurricane itself, but there was significant theft of fuel and equipment relating to telecommunications. We have indicated that we intend to amend the law to have stiffer penalties and to criminalize some of these acts because they do impact the entire economy and should be treated with more severely. In lieu of the amendments to the law, the security forces have been alerted that special attention ought to be paid to these critical infrastructure which are necessary for the continuity of government and for the continuity of business and indeed for public safety. So, Commissioner of Police, you have been tasked specifically to ensure that there is no break in our telecommunications and to ensure that these criminals who would want to take advantage of the disaster to exploit our telecommunications infrastructure, that they are dealt with in the harshest way. The JPS has informed that they have already taken steps to clear vegetation from their lines, and That is indeed good news. They had already started work in restoring their lines and strengthening the infrastructure. So I'm expecting that we would not have a fallout as we did during Hurricane Beryl. I'm told that Petrogen has made the necessary provisions and has taken the necessary steps to ensure that we would have over 2 weeks of refined products, fuels and other products that we would need, and LPG as well. So during and after the disaster, even if no ships were to come in, we would have at least 2 weeks of supplies. Now, during Hurricane Beryl, the greatest impact would have been on residential roofs. And in flooding in areas that are flood prone, houses would have been destroyed by flooding. It's very difficult to gauge whether or not this weather event will parallel Beryl in terms of its impact. This weather system seems to be very unusual in that it is essentially sitting there southeast of Jamaica, creeping at 2 miles per hour, and its eye would have been doing some strange things, but it is what we have heard is that the wind force has increased from, I believe, 45 miles per hour to now 60 miles per hour, so it is strengthening. Whatever happens, the projection is that it will come closer to Jamaica, and we would be affected one way or the other by either rain and wind or just rain. So whatever happens, we can safely say there will be an impact. Something will happen. The likely impact would be the rain event, and that would mean flooding, landslides. It would also mean that there could be some marooning of communities. Some communities could be cut off. And it would definitely mean a scouring of our already aged and struggling road infrastructure and possibly some impact on our bridges. It means, therefore, that households should take precautions in ensuring that whatever work they can do to their roofing to prevent leaks, they should do so. When we flew over the affected areas for Hurricane Beryl and we saw the roof damage, and then when we landed and saw the damage up front, what was clear is that the roofs that were damaged did not use the building code requirements in their construction. It is not too late to make adjustments and modifications to ensure that your roof is protected. The government will launch very comprehensive humanitarian and recovery strategy after the event. But for that to work effectively, the beneficiaries, the people who would require support and assistance, must have identification. There is a view that because it is a disaster, all the rules are suspended. I hasten to advise everyone, in particular the permanent secretaries, the heads of departments and the accounting officers and the ministers, there is no suspension of accountability rules, even in a disaster. And every dollar that is spent has to be accounted for. The same people who are screaming that we need it now, are the same people who will turn around and say, where did you spend that money? So there is no break in accountability. And we ask the cooperation of our citizens in providing proper identification so we can track where the benefits go, who received the benefits, and for what reason. This is also important when it comes to not just accounting to ourselves, which we must, but it is highly likely that we will get international donor funding and philanthropic support. And they too require that the resources that are given philanthropically is accounted for. So there would be an accounting process. So in practical terms, because this is going to be a weather event that is likely to be a heavy rain event, you should protect your important documents. Put them in a Ziploc bag, tie them up in a plastic bag, keep them somewhere safe. because we're going to need to be able to identify you in order to facilitate a very quick recovery process. If you live on gully banks, if you live in river courses, if you live in areas that were flooded during burial, expect that this will happen again, that there will be flooding. Take the necessary measures. I have not yet said evacuate, but if we declare a disaster, evacuation orders will be in effect. And that will be, as I said, within another few hours we should be able to declare that. But I'm putting everyone on notice. If you look on the map there, you will see that we have already scoped out the areas that are at risk. We will publish those. We will call up the names of the communities to say, be prepared, be alert. In terms of transportation for evacuation, the Ministry of Transport is already prepared. The JUTC buses are already alerted to the need for evacuation, so we will provide some amount of public transportation. If it becomes necessary, the toll roads will be open to allow persons to move more quickly and safely. So we are prepared in that regard as well, and we encourage persons, if you're called upon to be evacuated, take the opportunity and leave the area. I want to say a bit about information. You can't give too much information during a disaster. And this would be now our third press conference on the matter, third or fourth? Third press conference, and we keep informationalizing the public, and that is for a reason, because there could be persons with nefarious intent, or just mischievous intent, or just for fun, could provide information that is misleading, which could lead to disastrous consequences. So we have to be out there putting information in front of you all the time. And I would encourage all Jamaicans to pay attention to the official information sources, the Met Office, the Office of the Prime Minister, ODPEM, my pages, JIS, and of course the Ministry of Education and Information. So all our official pages. You can rest assured that all the pages are centrally coordinated. And just to say a word on the central coordination, ODPEM is the entity that is charged with the central coordination of Jamaica's disaster preparation and response. And they play some role in, a significant role actually, in recovery. But certainly at this phase of the disaster and during the humanitarian and relief effort and in the recovery effort. In terms of roadways and other infrastructure, Minister Morgan would have said that we have already allocated $400 million. Again, we have to be cautious. When do we make the allocation? And when do we commit the public expenditure? I think we have a good measure right now. We have done a good balance in giving all constituencies a minimum threshold of about $3 million, and that is to be used for drain cleaning or other civil works that is necessary to prevent flooding and landslides if possible. As the storm comes closer and we are able to project the areas that are going to be specifically impacted, then we will consider making other allocations. Now, I want here to say that the government does not have an unlimited source of revenues to respond to this event. But in the last 10 years, Jamaica can say that it has achieved a certain level of fiscal resilience, meaning we are able to respond to disasters, particularly without necessarily borrowing. And that is because we have, one, put contingencies in the budget. Two, we have a disaster fund that is funded, and we have parametric insurance that is in effect, and we have catastrophe bonds that are in effect, and we have certain borrowing arrangements conditional on a disaster. And so we have lined up quite